A song so powerful, it didn't just echo through speakers. It moved through hearts, through streets, through history itself. When it played, people didn't just listen, they felt change coming. This was more than music. This was a warning, a promise, a revolution wrapped in melody. And at the center of it all stood a quiet genius, Curtis Mayfield, and a group that would become the voice of a generation, the Impressions. But behind that sound of hope lies a story far deeper than most people know. A story of struggle, sacrifice, brotherhood, and the price of standing for something bigger than yourself. Fame came, but so did pain. Success followed, but so did loss. So what really happened to them, and where are they now? Because this isn't just music history, this is truth, raw, powerful, and impossible to ignore. It begins not in Chicago, where the world would come to know the Impressions, but in Chattanooga, Tennessee, in the mid-1950s, where three young men named Sam Gooden, Arthur Brooks, and Richard Brooks grew up singing together, dreaming together, and eventually making one of the boldest decisions a young black man from the American South could make in that era. They packed up and moved north, all the way to Chicago, Illinois, chasing music and chasing something bigger than Chattanooga was willing to offer them. In Chicago, they connected with a young man named Jerry Butler, a teenager from Sunflower, Mississippi who'd been raised in the Cabrini Green public housing projects on Chicago's North Side, and who had the kind of smooth, commanding baritone that made rooms go quiet the instant he opened his mouth. And Jerry Butler brought with him his closest friend, a skinny, quiet, fiercely intelligent boy named Curtis Lee Mayfield, born June 3, 1942, at Cook County Hospital in Chicago, raised in the gospel tradition of his grandmother's traveling soul spiritualist church. Curtis had taught himself guitar. He'd been writing songs since he was barely a teenager, and he heard music in a way that very few people in the history of American popular music have ever been able to hear it. Together, Butler, Mayfield, Gooden, the Brooks brothers, and soon Fred Cash, born October 8, 1940 in Chattanooga, they became the Impressions, and they were about to change everything. Their first record, For Your Precious Love, released in 1958 on VJ Records, went to number 3 on the R&B charts and number 11 on the Hot 100. Jerry Butler's voice was the instrument that carried it, deep, unhurried, devastatingly assured. The record made them stars overnight. But Jerry Butler was also an individual talent too large to be contained inside a group, and by 1960 he had departed for a solo career that would produce decades of hits, and eventually a remarkable second chapter as a Cook County politician in Chicago. The Brooks brothers, Arthur and Richard, left by 1962, quietly stepping back from the spotlight. And what remained, Curtis Mayfield, Sam Gooden, and Fred Cash, chose not to replace anyone. They became a trio. And that trio, in the hands of Curtis Mayfield's songwriting genius, became one of the most important vocal groups that America has ever produced.
The hits came one after another, and each one meant more than the last. It's All Right in 1963, Keep on Pushing in 1964, the first major pop song to explicitly urge Black Americans to press forward toward justice and equality. People Get Ready in 1965 ranked number 24 on Rolling Stone's list of the 500 greatest songs of all time, a song that Bob Dylan called one of the greatest ever written. We're a Winner in 1968, which Chicago radio stations initially refused to play because its message of Black pride was considered too provocative. 19 consecutive R&B hits, 12 of them crossing over onto the pop charts. Curtis Mayfield was doing something that had never truly been done before, writing soul music as social commentary, threading the gospel roots of Black American music through the urgent, burning reality of the civil rights movement, and making it sound so beautiful that even people who were uncomfortable with the message could not stop listening. Jimi Hendrix cited him, Bob Marley studied him, Marvin Gaye called him a peer, Stevie Wonder admired him. He was the conscience of a generation wrapped in the most luminous falsetto voice you ever heard. In 1970, Curtis Mayfield left the Impressions for a solo career, and what followed was equally monumental. His 1972 soundtrack to the film Superfly was a cultural earthquake, a record that simultaneously critiqued the drug culture it was soundtracking and produced music of such raw brilliance that it became one of the defining albums of the entire decade. The Impressions carried on with new members, Leroy Hudson, Ralph Johnson, Reggie Torian among them, finding moderate success through the 1970s before gradually quieting down. But the foundation that Curtis, Sam, and Fred had built was so solid, so deep in the bones of American music, that no amount of lineup changes could diminish what it meant. In 1991, the Impressions were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in Cleveland, Ohio. Curtis Mayfield, Jerry Butler, Sam Gooden, Fred Cash, Arthur Brooks, and Richard Brooks all recognized together for what they had collectively created. It was a night of reunion and tears and pure, justified pride. And then came August 13th, 1990, a date that every person who has ever loved Curtis Mayfield's music carries somewhere heavy inside them. Curtis was scheduled to perform at an outdoor concert at Wingate Field in Flatbush, Brooklyn, New York. 10,000 people were already gathered. A storm was rolling in fast. The organizers pushed his performance earlier to beat the weather. As Curtis walked to the stage and his band began to play, a ferocious gust of wind tore through the venue and collapsed the lighting rig directly onto him. The steel and metal crushed his spine in 3 places. He was 48 years old. He was paralyzed from the neck down. He would never walk again. He would never hold a guitar again, the same guitar he had taught himself to play as a child in the housing projects of Chicago, the same guitar whose unusual open tuning had given his music that unmistakable otherworldly shimmer. Gone in a single gust of wind on a summer night in Brooklyn. But what happened next says everything about who Curtis Mayfield was. He did not stop. He could not play guitar, could not stand, could not move his hands, and so he lay on his back in a recording studio and recorded one line at a time, letting gravity do what his diaphragm could no longer do, singing his final album, New World Order, in 1996, a record of such quiet courage that it left everyone who heard it speechless. In 1998, diabetes forced the amputation of his right leg. He was too ill to attend his own solo induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1999. On December 26, 1999, the day after Christmas, Curtis Lee Mayfield died at his home in Roswell, Georgia, surrounded by his family. He was 57 years old. The gentle genius was gone.
Now, let us account for where each member stands as of 2026. Curtis Mayfield, gone. December 1999, age 57. His legacy towering and permanent. Jerry Butler, the original Iceman, the voice that launched it all, built a remarkable second act as a Cook County Board of Commissioners member in Chicago for over 30 years, serving his community with the same quiet dignity he had brought to music. His voice had been stilled in his final years by Parkinson's disease. On February 20th, 2025, Jerry Butler died peacefully at his Chicago home at the age of 85, preceded in death by his wife of 60 years, Annette. Kenny Gamble and Leon Huff mourned him publicly, calling him their dear and longtime friend. Chicago mourned him as both a legend and a public servant, 2 things very few human beings ever managed to be simultaneously. Sam Gooden, one of the Chattanooga boys who started it all, the man who had been with the Impressions from the very first rehearsal to the very last performance, passed away on August 4th, 2022, in his hometown of Chattanooga, Tennessee, at 87 years old, after years of declining health. His daughter confirmed the news gently, the way you confirm the passing of someone who had given so much for so long. Richard Brooks, the Quiet co-founder from Chattanooga, died in Chattanooga on November 12, 2023. His brother, Arthur Brooks, had preceded him, passing away in 2015 after a long illness. Of the 6 original members inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, in 2026, only one remains, Fred Cash, born October 8, 1940 in Chattanooga, Tennessee, now 85 years old. The the last living original impression, the boy whose mother would not let him leave Chattanooga with the others in 1957, who joined the group later and outlasted all of them. Fred Cash carries that legacy now, all of it, in whatever quiet days he has left. In 2026, the music of the Impressions is everywhere and nowhere at the same time. Everywhere because People Get Ready still plays at funerals and marches and moments when human beings need to feel that tomorrow is worth reaching for. Nowhere because the voices that made it are almost all gone now, gone from stages, gone from studios, gone from this world. Curtis Mayfield wrote those feelings down in language so perfect that Martin Luther King Jr. himself drew strength from it. That is not a small thing. That is not something you can calculate in chart positions or Grammy counts or Hall of Fame plaques. That is a man and a group of men who used the only tool they had, which was their voices, and changed the world with it. Fred Cash is still here in 2026, a living thread connecting past to present, a witness to decades that reshaped music and culture. And as long as he is here, the train that started in Chattanooga and traveled through Chicago and Brooklyn and through the whole broken, beautiful history of Black America has not fully stopped. It is still moving, still carrying voices, harmonies, and stories that refuse to fade with time. That train holds the echoes of street corners, church choirs, and stages where dreams were tested and proven. It carries the weight of struggle and the lift of triumph, the quiet persistence of men who sang not just for fame, but for something deeper: identity, dignity, and connection. Fred Cash remains part of that motion, a reminder that history is not only something we look back on, but something still breathing in the present. And so the journey continues, rolling forward through generations who may not know every name, but feel every note just like the song always promised. That movement endures, alive, resilient, and still on track.